He wasn't hiding in the shadows. He wasn't running from the law. He went to work, came home, and lived a life that looked completely normal. For nearly 2 decades, this man moved through everyday routines while carrying a secret that would later shock the entire country. By the time the truth came out, the number attached to his name wasn't just disturbing, it was almost unbelievable. Dozens of lives lost, and still, no one around him saw it coming. That's what makes this story different. It's not just about what he did, it's about how he managed to live like nothing ever happened. Before we continue, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel. And let's dive into how a man like this could exist in plain sight. For years, he lived the kind of life no one questions. And he worked a steady job as a truck painter at a Kenworth plant, holding that position for more than 30 years. It was routine, predictable, and quiet. The kind of job that blends a person into the background. People around him saw nothing unusual. Co-workers described him as small, unassuming, and easy to overlook. When he was finally arrested in 2001, some even joked about it at first, not realizing how serious it really was. At home, things didn't raise alarms either. He had multiple marriages, and by 1988, he was in a relationship that appeared stable and normal. He attended church regularly, read the Bible out loud, and showed strong emotional reactions during sermons. To the outside world, he looked like a man trying to live a disciplined religious life. What made it even more unsettling was how ordinary he truly seemed. His IQ was recorded around 82, and he didn't fit the image people expect when they think of someone capable of such crimes. No flashy behavior, no obvious warning signs in his daily routine, just consistency. And that's exactly what allowed him to disappear in plain sight for so long. Long before everything came to light, there were signs. Not loud, not obvious, but enough to show something wasn't right. He grew up in a tense home where control and punishment were common. His mother was described as strict and often harsh. And those early years left a mark. As a teenager, his thoughts were already drifting into dangerous territory. He later admitted to violent fantasies and a growing obsession with control and aggression. At just 16 years old, he lured a 6-year-old boy into the woods and stabbed him. The child survived, but the act itself revealed something deeply troubling. It wasn't treated as the kind of warning it should have been. Instead, life moved on. School didn't help either. He struggled with learning, was diagnosed with dyslexia, and had an IQ recorded in the low 80s. He repeated a grade and often felt isolated. These difficulties added to a sense of frustration that never really went away. There were also early patterns forming around control and behavior. His thinking, his actions, and his growing impulses were all pointing in one direction. But at the time, no one connected those dots. As time went on, his actions became more calculated. He didn't choose randomly. He focused on women who were already in vulnerable situations, mainly those working along Pacific Highway South in the Seattle-Tacoma area. Thought many were runaways or living unstable lives, which meant their sudden disappearance often didn't get immediate attention. That made his pattern harder to detect early on. He approached them in a way that felt ordinary, like any other customer passing through, calm, polite, and unremarkable. There was nothing about his behavior that raised concern in those first moments. In some cases, he even showed a picture of his son, using it as a way to appear more trustworthy. It created a false sense of safety that worked again and again. His mindset was very clear. He later admitted, "I picked prostitutes as my victims because I hate most prostitutes and I did not want to pay them for sex." That statement shows this wasn't random behavior. It was deliberate, repeated, and built on a fixed way of thinking. Everything followed a pattern. Same locations, same approach, same setup. And that consistency is what allowed him to continue unnoticed. And once that routine was in place, what followed became disturbingly consistent every single time. What made this case even more disturbing was how consistent everything became. His actions followed a pattern that rarely changed. He relied on manual strangulation, often during or shortly after the encounter, using his hands rather than weapons. This method left fewer traces and gave him complete control in the moment. Afterward, he would move the bodies to quiet, remote areas. These included wooded locations, riverbanks, and places that were difficult to access or notice. Many of these sites were in South King County, including areas near the Green River and roads connected to his daily routes. There was also a disturbing level of repetition in how he handled these scenes. Bodies were sometimes left in clusters, which made it harder to establish clear timelines. In some cases, he returned to these locations later and revisiting the same sites. He also tried to confuse any investigation by leaving behind items that didn't belong to him, like gum or cigarette-related materials. He even moved some remains across state lines into Oregon, adding another layer of confusion. Everything about this routine showed planning, not impulse. And as this method became more efficient, the number of victims began to rise faster than anyone realized. The pattern didn't stay small for long. It escalated quickly, especially between 1982 and 1984. The first known victim, 16-year-old Wendy Lee Caulfield, disappeared on July 8th, 1982, and her body was found just a week later near the Green River. That discovery was only the beginning. Within weeks, more bodies started appearing in the same area, creating a pattern that was impossible to ignore. By August 1982, multiple victims had already been found, many in similar conditions and locations. The clustering of these cases led to growing concern as the number kept increasing in a short period of time. Through 1983, the situation intensified. Several disappearances and recoveries were linked to the same pattern, pushing the known victim count higher and higher. By 1984, dozens of cases were connected, with reports suggesting up to 28 identified victims by that point. The area around King County became the center of fear, as more remains were discovered in wooded areas and along quiet roads. Even as attention grew, the activity didn't fully stop. It slowed at times but continued into the 1990s, with the final confirmed case linked to 1998. In total, 49 victims were officially confirmed, while he later claimed the number was even higher. And while the numbers kept rising, the investigation struggled to keep up with the reality of what was happening. As the number of cases grew, a large-scale investigation was launched. In August 1982, a dedicated task force was formed to track down the person responsible. Over time, it expanded to more than 50 personnel and eventually involved hundreds of officers, costing over $15 million and becoming one of the most extensive investigations of its kind. Thousands of leads were followed, more than 20,000 individuals were interviewed over the years, and yet the person responsible remained out of reach. What makes this even more unsettling is that he wasn't invisible to the investigation. He was questioned multiple times between 1983 and 1987. He even provided hair and saliva samples during that period. Despite that, nothing stuck. At one point, he even passed a polygraph test, which reduced suspicion around him. The investigation focused heavily on profiles that didn't match him, looking for someone more intelligent, more noticeable, more outwardly suspicious. He didn't fit that image. Important evidence was also overlooked early on. Small details, like paint particles linked to his workplace, were not properly analysed at the time. Those missed connections allowed the pattern to continue longer than it should have, and for years, he remained just another name in a long list. For years, the case stayed stuck with no clear answer. Then everything shifted in 2001. Advances in DNA testing allowed old evidence from the 1980s to be examined again using newer methods. Samples that once gave no clear results suddenly became the key. DNA collected years earlier was finally matched to him, connecting him directly to multiple victims. This wasn't a new clue. It was the same evidence that had been sitting there for years, waiting for technology to catch up. Once the match was confirmed, the focus narrowed quickly. Surveillance followed, and the case that had remained open for nearly 2 decades finally moved forward. On November 30th, 2001, he was arrested at the Kenworth Truck Factory, where he had worked for decades. It happened in the middle of a normal workday, at the same place where he had blended in for years without raising suspicion. The reaction around him was disbelief. People who knew him couldn't connect the quiet man they worked with to what was being revealed, but the evidence was clear. And for the first time, the case had a definitive answer. And once he was in custody, the story took an even darker turn when he finally started talking. After his arrest in 2003, he entered a plea agreement and admitted guilt to 48 counts of aggravated first-degree murder. In exchange for avoiding the death penalty, he agreed to provide detailed information about the crimes and help locate victims who are still missing. Over months of interviews, he described what he had done with a level of detail that shocked everyone involved. He confirmed how he approached victims, how he carried out the acts, and where he left them. But what stood out even more was the number. He didn't stop at 48. In recorded statements, he claimed responsibility for as many as 71 victims, saying he had lost count over time. I picked prostitutes as my victims because I hate most prostitutes and I did not want to pay them for sex. That statement alone revealed how fixed his thinking had become. On December 18, 2003, he was sentenced to 48 life terms without the possibility of parole, along with additional years for each case. Later, a 49th conviction was added after more remains were identified. For nearly 20 years, he moved through life without being stopped, even as one of the largest investigations in US history unfolded around him. Thousands of leads, years of work, and still he remained just another ordinary face in the crowd. Even today, efforts continued as recently as 2024 to search for possible remains, showing that this story is not completely closed. What makes this case stay with people isn't just the scale, but how easily it went unnoticed for so long. So, Ridgway admitted he targeted specific women because he hated them and didn't want to pay them. Do you think his crimes were more about a deep-seated hatred or a calculated desire for absolute control? Share your thoughts in the comments on this. Make sure to like the video, subscribe to the channel for more, and thanks for watching.